So, welcome back to the drawing table, where we have chill and casual conversations about art and, of course, creating it as well. We are your hosts, Jourdan Tuffan
and Ken Darmadi. And today we're gonna have a feedback session, and we ask you guys to submit us your work in progress or pieces or images that you are struggling with, along with a description of what it's about and maybe what you're struggling with and what the end goal is.
And the main reason that we decided to do these feedback sessions, well, aside from the fact that who doesn't like, getting feedback, but we've also realized that at the start of our careers, we found that it was really challenging to find an experienced artist to ask for some advice and help, either because maybe they're too busy, or maybe it's sometimes ourselves holding ourselves back, that we get a little bit too nervous. We think, well, what if they're too busy? What if I annoy them? So we've decided to keep that in mind and create this new segment for the podcast, where, as Ken said, we allowed the viewers to submit their artwork for us to do a live paint over on the stream. And yes, you'll be getting two different paint overs individually from each of us, actually. So it won't just be one, but you'll get two for the price of one, which is, essentially free. And we also believe that having these specific descriptions about the artwork to accompany the submissions to be very important, is because from our experiences in working in a studio environment or with a client, there can be some specifications that we aren't exactly aware of, and someone that is not aware of it giving you feedback might actually give some that leads you astray from the original intent. And for that specific reason, we believe that having the right context and knowledge could lead us to giving you more concise feedback as well. And even if
I think
go on, Ken.
I think having that description will really help us focus our feedback on what exactly you're struggling with. And as you mentioned about the studio setting, we usually have a brief, and each brief requires specific specifications for each of them. And if someone who doesn't know what the spec is, they might just even hinder the progress of your work.
Definitely.
Because I mean, I've had experiences where I did extra work, but I wasn't really following the brief, and it was just pointless waste of time and energy in the end. So
definitely.
I think it's really necessary to have to provide us with the details of what you want to do with the image.
Yeah, it could also be the whole thing of like too many cooks spoiling the cooking or the broth.
For sure.
When you have too much input, it gets a little bit muddy. And good to see you in the chat as well, Evan and Basilust.
Basilust.
Well, correct me if I'm pronouncing it incorrectly. But yes, Dom, I believe you're one of the people that did submit feedback, or at least a piece for feedback, but you did not submit a description of your artwork. So we actually would like you to provide us with one right now, so that we'll be able to give you more concise feedback, because otherwise I really do think that it might sometimes be counterproductive to give feedback on something that perhaps goes against your intentions. So if you are here and you would like your piece to have feedback on, do let us know. So with that said,
and sorry, just one more. So unfortunately for some other people who actually submitted their work to us but didn't provide what their descriptions are, we can't do it for the podcast because we think it's counterproductive.
And
so
it's also
please be sure to remember to submit that next time.
For sure. And I feel like it's a little bit unfair for those that actually have followed the instructions as well. So do keep that in mind. But we are willing to, let it slide, at least for this podcast. But yes, let's just jump straight into it, guys. So after the feedback session, we'll be doing a Q&A session where we open up the mic to the audience to just ask whatever they want. And of course, an artwork of the week segment like we always do. And yes, without further ado, let us jump straight into it, guys.
Actually, do you want to talk about your Switch, Jourdan?
Oh yeah, well, that's actually one exciting thing that has happened since the last podcast. Let me actually go back to, and I have it right here. Barely keep up to date, and whenever someone is in the studio talking about the newest game or movie, or if Ken is telling me about this great game, I would be like, yeah, okay, meh, sure, it sounds cool, but it doesn't really interest me. But there is one game series that, if you guys have watched the childhood influences chat session that we had a while back, there is one game series called Dragon Quest that I'm madly in love with, and I pretty much decided to get the Switch for that one game itself. Dragon Quest 11S Definitive Edition.
Yeah, and you say you're a big fan, but you've only played for 3 hours.
Hey, that's a lot for me, okay?
That's disappointing levels.
Dude, 3 hours in 2 weeks is like a lot compared to all of the previous years that I've spent gaming combined. So it's something, alright?
Right. Okay. Fair enough. For you.
Yes.
Okay.
So you have to give me some low standards to reach, man.
Yeah,
I'm not an
an
elite gamer such as yourself.
Anyways, should we move on to the feedback then?
Yes, let us do that.
Let's do Azit first.
So as you can see here, we have a
we're
lovely illustration.
We're going alphabetically.
Sort of. I think it just happened to be a coincidence with the order that people were submitting things. But yes, this is the first piece that we've received by Azit. And Ken, would you do the honors of reading out the description that he provided for us for this piece?
Oh yeah. Let me make this bigger so you guys can also see it on screen. Oh, give me 1 second. Let me just darken this. Alright.
Oh, and Ken, I don't think the music is looping.
Oh, really?
I don't think so, because I tried to hear it a while on Twitch and it seems to
be
silent.
It turned off again because I switched scenes and I haven't really set it up for this scene.
Yeah.
Should be back now.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, it's back. Alright. Awesome. Okay. So this piece is by Azit Paizi. And the description that he provided us says, this work tells the story of a druid. Safin is a druid. It was such a bright afternoon. The wind is so gentle. Escort Safin to walk around the ruins of ancient buildings with some deer. I still have no idea what my struggles are with my work. Maybe the struggle is in arranging colors, depth of field. But if there is another struggle, please let me know what your opinion is. I hope with this submission it can help me to improve. Thanks very much.
So what are your initial thoughts, Ken, after reading the description that he gave and also the things that he considers to be points of improvement?
Okay, so I think the biggest issue that, well, first of all, let me just say what's good about this piece.
Yes.
I think even when he says arranging colors, I think the color itself works quite nicely in this piece. I like the contrast between the blue and the yellow and warmth of the sunlight. But what doesn't really work, in my opinion, is the value grouping and value arrangement of the piece. And It's also something that I noticed with the rest of the submissions. It's the control of values. And we can talk more about that later.
Yeah,
but
it's a tricky thing for
this
sure.
one, let's
so
just discuss.
I understand.
And he also mentions depth of field, which I think can be achieved by having the details just be on the focal point, area surrounding the focal point. So for example, if this is the focal point, then this part should be the most detailed, and then should kind of radiate from that, so it starts to get smaller and less detailed as you go further from the focal point. So should I just start paint over?
Yeah, definitely. I think you can start on that, and I can also provide my own thoughts as well. So first of all, what I do like about the piece is the storytelling that's going on. You know, it's a very simple story that's being told, you know, of Safin the druid walking through the ruins with her deer buddies. And it's a very, I think, lighthearted scene. And I don't think all stories necessarily have to be this epic that's unfolding, you know. And
dear.
I bet you were just waiting like until the podcast to say that, Ken. And what's sad is probably that's the best one that you've got, right?
You'll see. Okay.
But yeah, I really do like that simple story that's being told, because I do think it can tell a lot more about a character rather than just them standing in a void. So I do think that even the background matters in contributing towards the storytelling. And in terms of what you're struggling on, yeah, I do agree with what Ken is saying. I do think it's mostly a value problem more than anything else. But I do have a few things as well I would like to comment in terms of set dressing properly to make the area feel a little bit more like ruins, because it still feels a bit too clean now. Even despite the fact that you have overgrowth in certain areas, it just feels way too contained in those areas that doesn't communicate to me as ruins.
Yeah, and we actually did find some references beforehand to show what we meant about set dressing the environment with more believable details.
So this is just from a cursory Google search of ancient ruins, and I think these are fantastic references to work off of. So as you can see with a lot of these images, there's a lot of rubble, of course, which you have in certain areas, and dead foliage here and there, which is good. But like I said, let's just say that if I cover up these areas, the areas that have those hints of ruin, it just doesn't feel like ruins anymore. And I think that's something important, is that the sum of the whole image reads rather than just some localized parts. So as you can see, once I covered it up, if you ask someone what kind of setting this is, I don't think many of them would say it's ruins as much as it is just a stroll through a temple. So that's my initial thoughts, and I would actually like to address that first, because values, as much as it helps with the read, I do think the storytelling is paramount in these kinds of images. So I'm actually going to address that by selecting some parts of this photo and bashing it in, just to illustrate my point more quickly. And I can paint it in as well too.
What I'm doing more right now is to try and fix the values at first, and we can talk more about the design later. But I think
I think that would be a good way.
See from just I mean, you can do what you think needs to be done first, and I can do mine. But I think even just by simplifying the details and then adding a bit more separation to the foreground, middle ground, and then background, it already kind of helps with the read of the image itself. Then just adding
definitely.
a bit more atmosphere.
Yeah, I think that can be a really big part.
Depth of field, I think, can be achieved. Just one is like the detail level, and then the other is by implementing atmospheric perspective.
Yeah.
So as you go further into the distance, the shadows will get lighter as there's more particles in the air between the camera and the object.
Definitely. I think that's what can help give a sense of depth, is if there is a difference in terms of the value range from the foreground, for example, to the midground and background. And I feel like right now it's quite flat, especially if we view the image in values. And I think that's something that's really important to do, is just do a quick value check. And yeah, I'm not really feeling that depth just from that alone.
It's really, really good point. And this is one thing that we noticed, is that this deer, I think you're trying to do some shaking its butt. But yeah, I think you're trying to do some kind of lost edge technique, but it's not really working well, because lost edges typically happens in areas where there's a lot more shadows, because like for example this part here could be in shadow. Not the deer, but
I would go on, Ken, sorry.
In shadow, and then if this part is also in shadow, you can kind of make the shadows blend together, so there's no actual edge showing. Or I think this one might be a better example. For example, this one here, I can just kind of merge the shadow between the rock and the pillar, because it's not exactly an important detail, right? I can just imply by having some reflected light from the sky or something, and having the rock just completely in shadow.
I would actually say that with lost edges in general, it would be good to just consider if it's in neighboring, if the values are neighboring or not. I think that's a simple way of applying it. And why it doesn't work out here is just because it feels like it's trying to blend a darker value with a lighter one. And it can be used to illustrate bouncing light, but somehow the way that it's localized, it really makes it feel like, when a dog is wet and it's trying to shake itself dry, it feels like the deer is pretty much doing that, or it kind of looks like a deer is twerking in hyperspeed, because it's only localized to the butt area. So yeah, I think that's something to be considerate of. And for me, what I'm also doing right now is that, as you can see, I am cracking up the stairs and also adding some foliages that are growing in the nooks and crannies, because typically the way that foliage grows, or dirt, the way it collects, is that it gathers itself in where two edges meet, because that's where a lot of the moisture gets trapped, and as a result, the moisture pretty much contributes to the growth in those areas. And the thing with nature as well, if you leave it alone long enough, it will actually overtake the area. And if you want to communicate that these are ruins, then you definitely would want to show that maybe nature has begun to overtake it. Of course, that depends on how old the place is, because maybe the ruins, if you want to specify it even more, is a ruin from a bandit attack and everything is charred and it's singed. So you have to think about what kind of ruin specifically as well. That's another point of consideration, in my opinion, is what the narrative is. But
sure.
assuming
I think
that
right now the ruin, the ruin looks really generic in
Yeah.
terms of what it is. Even the pillars doesn't really have any details at all. Like it looks flat. And I think just by adding a bit more hints of what the ruins are used for,
Exactly.
basically more story to the environment, it will add so much more.
Like, for example, if it's the ruins to a library, for example, maybe she is treading through the ruins of a civilization that was so advanced with its scholarly knowledge. So if that's the case, maybe you want to put some books or banners or something around of that nature.
Books,
And
banners.
Yeah, books. Or thinking about the design language of the place as well, because the pillar design itself is really plain over here, and you can tell a lot even with the type of inscriptions or carvings you have on the pillars. And you want to make sure that you show the wear and tear even in the silhouette, so you want to bite into some of this area.
Right. Oh, and also something about the pillar, and I think you're using 3D for this, but I'm not sure why the pillar looks flat, because if you map a texture to a cylinder, it should wrap around the mesh itself, but this one looks like you're just overlaying a stone texture on top. So if you see the edges, the texture doesn't wrap around, so it makes the pillars look like a 2D cutout instead of a 3D object.
Yeah, I think maybe the pillars were done, the texturing for the pillars were actually done in Photoshop.
Maybe.
I
but
think so.
See if I just...
I think Azid provided us with a link to his image on ArtStation.
Oh, right. Let me check that out.
So going back to what I was saying, maybe there's like curtains that have fallen, and you have... Oh, and this will also tie in quite nicely with the point of the brief where you said that there's a gentle breeze going around. And there's not too much of a feeling of a breeze here because everything is static. Even the foliage is not bending over, the leaves are static on the ground, and as a result, everything feels like it's not moving, it's dead. Whereas if you add some elements that are swaying in the wind, you can actually begin to hint at the whole area being affected by some sort of gust.
Right.
And you want to try and break 90-degree edges as well in general, because they make image feel super static. And maybe to increase that feeling of brightness and sunniness, you can consider about the foliage as well. What kind of foliage that we're looking at here. Maybe there's flowers as well that make it feel like there's hope, shining into this place.
And I'm not sure, maybe because you just overlay a photo on top, but it's a good idea to double check your perspective again, because for example, if this is the perspective like that, then the detail at the top of the pillar should curve downwards like that. So that's one thing to note when you're using photo bash or like photo usage. It still has to fit into the image, and you have to make sure that what you're bashing is correctly placed in perspective, more or less.
Some surface scattering. But my paint over is focusing more on the storytelling side of things, whereas Ken, I think, is covering a little bit more of the fundamentals such as values and perspective. So I think it's good to actually get some variety in that. But mine definitely needs some more cohesion.
I'll cover everything.
Yeah. So this is...
Oh, and sorry, one more thing about photo usage. This one feels like you're just overlaying some kind of adjustment layer on top, because the shadows from the bricks are flat. Because if it's an actual light casting onto this pillar, then each piece of the brick or stone that made up this pillar should have a bit of contact or form shadow on it. That makes it feel a lot more real, and just makes it feel more integrated into the painting.
Oh, and a big thing as well is that the cast shadows. I think this image is lacking quite a lot of cast shadows.
Yeah,
which makes
I'm not sure why.
Maybe it's just something.
Like if you see, if you see the person herself, the druid herself, there's no cast shadow at all on her.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing that makes the image feel floaty, and not necessarily in terms of the mood, but it's just like something's off, you know. So I'm right now addressing the idea of values, or the fundamentals of values. So right now I'm just simplifying the shadows and just make it clear what area is in shadow, what is in light, because a lot of the light grouping right now is quite muddy, where it feels like it's hard to tell what's being lit by what and where the shadow direction is coming from.
I think having really nice cast shadows will help improve this painting a lot.
Yes, it's a solid one, man. Don't get us wrong with the comments that we're making. It's just more about how to push it to the next level. You know? I do think it is a solid one. And
it's a solid start for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I like it.
Yeah.
So I'm just adding in the shadows right now, and the pillars also would be casting shadows, so you can have this nice light pattern where it's light dark, light dark, you know. And since we want the place to feel sunny based on the mood description as well, I'm going to put the exposure in the shadows so that the light area is the one that's blown out.
Do you want to explain what exposing shadows mean?
Well, the way that I'd put it simply, when you're talking about exposure, what's in whether in shadow or light, it's talking about where is the biggest allocation of value range found. So if we had, let me just do this. So if we had wait one moment. So let me check that I'm saving over the right one. Okay, so if we had this whole value spectrum, so this is from, give me a moment. So if this is the full value spectrum, let me put a gradient tool on. So if this is a full value spectrum and we're talking about exposure, if something is exposed, we're going to be having the most value range allocated to it. So if it's in the light, then we want to have all of these value ranges, for example, used in the light. And I tend to leave a gap in between so that there's no overlap in values where possible, or at least when I'm starting it off. And then these are the values allocated in the dark. And I think the problem sometimes with muddy values is this is what happens. This is light values, and this is shadow values as well. A lot of the values are evenly distributed, and sometimes there's an overlap. So I will illustrate that, and hopefully this will ring true. And I will get to your question soon enough, Thea. So before the paint over, I will now pick the value for something in the light, which is, I'll just put the color here, and then I'll pick a value in the shadow, something here, or even on the same object actually. You'll notice that in the value spectrum, so if we bring this back up, this value is around here. I'm looking on my Kularas, which you guys can't see. And then the other one is here. So it's very close to each other. So I'm going to show you what will happen once I adjust the exposure. So I'm actually going to blow it up. I want the exposure to be in the shadow in this case. So I'm gonna have most of the value range in the shadows. And then I'll blow this up around like this. So this is going to be the value range for the light. And then this is the value range for the shadow. And bada bing, bada boom. This is over here. And this one is now over here. And I am going for this value distribution right now. So that's
This is a master class by Jourdan.
I'm actually recently learning this myself. I've learned a lot from my friends at the studio. So shout outs to Axel and Thomas. I mean, they're the true masters, honestly, when it comes to color and light. So as you can see, the light value is actually here. So it fits around this area that I've allocated. And the dark is still here as well. Somewhere around there. But then it also comes down to local color relativity as well. So it gets quite complex in some ways to balance it out. But I think it'll make more sense as you put that into practice. It's I think I need a little bit more time to fully formulate it, but yeah, if it's going to help you and anyone in the chat at all, I'm glad to hear that. So for the shortcut that I'm using as well, I've actually set my Control Y, and I think that is already the default one, to proof setup. And I've changed the setting for the proof setup to, I think, dot gain 20%. Grayscale. Yeah. Working gray dot gain 20%. So this is what it looks like.
By the way, they can't see it on screen.
Yeah. Wait, let me take a new screenshot. So this is how it looks like on my screen. And you can find it. Oh man. So you can find it here. So this is where it is on the toolbar. You can find proof setup, and then I click custom and this will appear, and I set it to working gray dot gain. And I can just flip it on and off with Control Y. And I think we should actually move on soon, Ken.
Give me a minute.
I think we're gonna spend around 20 minutes on.
Yep. And what I've been doing is just reducing the amount of details, adding contact shadows, and adding like dappled lights from the forest onto the pillars. So I think dappled lights are really beautiful, especially in the forest settings. So I think it's a good idea to add those, to add some kind of liveliness to the scene.
I think
and
that's
as
a really
Jourdan mentioned about, just finding references of like how these ruins are actually laid out and how you can add more believability to the environment by just adding a few more details here and there. And especially what I did most was the cash shadow and value grouping. I think those two are really helping this image to just be more clear. For example, this one on the deer, there was too much details going on. I just reduce them and then bringing the values closer together so it's not as distracting. Same thing with what's going on with the character itself, just adding some contact shadows, not contact, sorry, cast shadows, making sure that she sits right on the scene. There was no contact shadows there at all. And just, adding a bit more destruction to the ruins itself, because it still looks quite pristine and new. So if you just add a bit more cracks to the ground and maybe there's some plants or trees, grasses growing between the grouts, you know, you can go add so much more.
And then flying leaves as well.
Yeah. I think since you also mentioned that she's a druid, wouldn't it be cool if, this is just an idea that I have, wouldn't it be cool if wherever she steps, some kind of flower or grass grows?
That's cool. That's a cool idea.
From her footsteps, you know?
It's I guess a little bit inconvenient, I think, if you think about it. Especially if you're trying.
It's just gonna. It's just gonna sell the idea a bit more.
Yeah, definitely. That would be really cool. I think she'd make a really crappy ninja though. So yeah. Well, this is my paint over. I could definitely push it more, and the value adjustments are quite crude, but this was before the value adjustments, so this is more to do with the idea of making it look more like ruins, and more can be done to the pillars in the back, but you get the idea from the foreground pillar here. And then this is it with the value adjustments. And I think, it reads clear, but like I said, I think it could use a little bit more love. But
let me full screen your screen.
Okay, yes. But yeah, hopefully it gives you a better idea, Azid, on what you can push.
Wow, looks really nice, man. Thanks,
dude. But yeah, you did I think a good job even with what you had before. It's just a matter of pushing it, you know. We're just working off of what you've already given us.
Yeah. So it's already a really strong base to start a nice painting.
Definitely. So that would be it for your piece, Azid. So once again, thank you so much for submitting it to us and allowing us to do a paint over of it. And hopefully it helps.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the first piece. And we're going to be moving on to the next one.
Let me show mine. This as a conclusion. Let me do some real quick last minute paint over on the light, so it feels more like a bright afternoon, just pushing that sunlight a bit more. I don't think so. I think yours look much more polished, but whatever. Okay, I think this is good. Okay, there we go. Yeah. No. Maybe. Thank you. Right, so this is after and then before. It's just a lot about adding a bit more love to the environment. And value grouping. Yep. Oh. Interesting. Oh, wait. My bad. Should work.
We all know you did it.
Yeah, it should. Yeah. Okay. I think this works. That's all right. Yeah. So this is before, after, before. So the main takeaways are value grouping, cast shadows, and then, as Jourdan mentioned, it's the exposure, exposing for the shadow instead of the light. If you want to have a bright afternoon feel to it. Yeah, that's it, I think.
All right, sounds good. Let us move on to the next piece.
Man, yours look really nice from the thumbnail.
Only from the thumbnail.
No, that's awesome. No. I mean, the thumbnail is what's important. Yeah, that's awesome, man.
Well, thank you. But yes, let's move on to the next piece, guys. So this is a submission by Benjamin Matthew. So thank you for sharing this piece with us, dude, and allowing us to do a live paint over of it. So I'll read out the description for this piece, or at least what he sent to us. So I'm a French artist living near Paris. I work in a few studio recently and as a props and background artist mainly. I'm trying to improve my background skills. The story I would like to tell is pretty simple. I took the notion of green oases in the desert and translated it into the snow. The pic is a part of a bigger project still in progress of the full snow village. A fisherman village on a small island up north, surrounded by ice and huge fish. That's awesome. The inhabitants struggle in their daily lives with the cold and the hostile environment. The timeline of this project is taking place in the future, but the village is old. The inhabitants add technology on the houses, roof doors, etc. I would like to make it a very cartoony project. And my struggles, mainly light and mood direction. Where do I have to put more details on the painting? And composition advice and shape language could be great too. I feel like this piece is okay, but lacking some sort of strong focusing point. I spent too much time on it and I'm not very happy with the result. Well, I actually don't know why you're not very happy with it, Benjamin, because I really like this piece. I do think that the architecture design is quite unique. I haven't really seen many of it like that, let alone in snowy mountains.
Yeah.
So I think that alone, with the contrast of the green oases in it, already makes for quite a strong statement.
For sure.
What do you think, Ken?
I completely agree. I think this is already a really strong piece, and we might struggle with giving proper feedback for this one.
Hey, you've already done the hard work for us, Benjamin.
Yeah, exactly. I think even the shape itself is already pretty interesting, as you mentioned. Well, but we'll try our best. I do think that you can play a bit more with the contrast of shapes. For example, the mountain, it's kind of blending in with the cloud at the back, but in here you have the mountain kind of not diagonal, but kind of geometrical. So why not have it like this, so it contrasts more with the building and the clouds? Because I think what's gonna make a scene interesting is the contrast, the play of shapes in it, you know.
Definitely.
But I think in terms of colors, the light and mood, it's already pretty on point, in my opinion.
On fleek.
Yeah. What do you think, Jourdan? What do you think can be improved?
I think that I'm going to go more the route of design thinking, because in terms of just the basic finish, the finish of this piece is already quite strong, man. And Taya in the chat as well also says, yeah, wow, I love this one, and it is I think a strong image as it is already.
Oh,
and
he's actually in the chat, Jourdan.
Yes, I see that. Hello, Kako.
Nice.
Great to have you join us, man, and you're just in time. So if you have any thoughts and you would like to, just have a discussion with us as we're working on the piece, I think that'll be really cool, so that we can just bounce back some ideas. Because often with a feedback session, if you're doing it face to face, it won't just be a one-way lecture. And lack of details, I wouldn't say so, man. I think with what you're saying, with the piece being cartoony, you don't really need something that is overly detailed. We can push it in some areas since you're asking to improve in that aspect of the piece, but that's not what I'm gonna be focusing on. But what I'm doing right now actually is that I am trying to make the mountains in the background less green for a couple of reasons. First of all, I'm trying to play around with the idea of contrast, and I think for the oasis or the greenhouse to stand out a lot more, what you have to do is tone the other things around it down, so that the greenhouse becomes a lot more lush and warm in comparison. Because there's only so much you can do sometimes in terms of addition, that you have to rely on subtraction in order to create the intended effect, or to enhance it at least. So that's what I'm starting off with.
And I think just to add to what Jourdan is saying, you can play with color contrast as well, because a lot of the scene has very cool colors, and even the greens here, it's getting towards the cool side, and also the greens here, it's also getting towards the cool side. So if you can contrast it a bit more with what's on the warmer side like this, it would definitely help sell the Oasis idea, in my opinion.
Definitely. So what I'm trying to do right now is just make the sky feel a little bit less monotonous, because what's happening, usually the sky is the one that's still blue, but if the sun is quite low laying on the horizon, then there's going to be a lot more atmosphere that's traveling to, and that's why you see it sometimes in travel photography, especially in scenes of like the sun setting down in the desert. You'll notice that the horizon gets especially warm. So that's what I'm trying to play around with, to make the sky feel a bit more blue without actually making it more blue, based on the principles that we were talking about just now of contrast. So I'm trying to pump that up a bit and just making the mood feel a lot more inviting and warm. So I'm just separated the elements, and I don't know why. There we go. My gradient tool wasn't working. And I'm even going to push the mountain back a bit more, because one thing that I think the piece is lacking is depth. It feels quite flat, and we can analyze
atmospheric perspective.
Yes, that is correcto. So what I'm gonna do right now is actually just create a selection of the foreground elements, and before that I will just check the whole image in values. You'll notice that if we've looked at it from far away, you'll notice that the value range for the mountain here is similar to the value range of the building in the foreground. And if you ask people to tell which elements are in different depths, I think it'll be hard to tell. So what I'm trying to do right now is actually push the mountain back. So this is the layer with the mountain. I'm just going to use a quick levels adjust to push it way back, and from afar you'll already notice a distinction. So this also goes back a little bit to exposure as well, and atmospheric perspective that we covered during Aziz's feedback as well. So I'm just going to select the mountain and duplicate it. And because I think the mountain is so solitary and it's so dominant in the image, even taller than your main building, it's kind of competing for attention, I feel. What do you think, Ken?
I agree. I think it kind of makes the composition of the painting divided in half. So it's like there's these
explain
two tall objects on both the left and then the right side, and they kind of split in half. So it just makes it a bit not nice in terms of composition. And I think what Jourdan is doing right now with adding some mountains on the other side, it really helps make the composition feels nicer, and that way we can also refocus the focal point to the greenhouse by making the shape of the mountain maybe kind of sloping towards the greenhouse itself. Like we can play with the shape for sure.
And to increase the scale as well, you'll notice that I'm increasing the density of detail without actually making it overly detailed as well. So I'm creating small value shapes here. So I'm not really thinking about tiny trees.
Sorry,
you can.
Yeah.
But I'm just keeping the shape quite general right now.
I think one more thing about there's this idea that just occurred to me. What you're saying about the lack of detail might be because everything is so detailed in this painting that everything feels like it has no details. So what Jourdan is saying about reducing instead of adding, that could work here. So by reducing the amount of noise in the background, it will make it feel like the focal point has a lot more details than it actually is. And again, this is about contrast. Contrast is king in everything.
Definitely.
Contrast in shapes, contrast in line and shadow, contrast in details. It's just this contrast makes an image interesting.
Definitely.
So it's not just about adding details, but as Jourdan mentioned, it's about removing them to create contrast. And even contrast in color temperature.
And Benjamin, I don't think it's always about it's refocusing in some. Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, it's actually about refocusing, because I'm trying to keep the essence of your composition. I'm not saying that you should change it drastically. It's just that right now, I think there's a lot of things that are competing for attention that you have to kind of tone the other things down rather than bolstering other parts of the image, if that makes sense. So that covers more of the what do you call it, the aspect of contrast, which I think is important.
And I think the mountain, if I look at it now, it's such a distraction from the focal point, because almost everything on the mountain is lit evenly, and it's just making this really strong shape at the top. So just by making a bit more interesting shapes in the shadow, and it also helps suggest more details than what it actually is. It will also help just reduce the amount of attention that it's shouting.
Definitely. if you think about this, maybe thinking about it in this way, that the viewers or people looking at the piece, they have a limited amount of attention. And when you have everything shouting for attention, it's like me, look at me, you know. If that's the case, then it can become overwhelming to the point that you wanna just like shut it out, you know. You're not able to just enjoy the piece as it is because you're trying to actually tune things out, and that can become a chore for the viewer sometimes to try and look at your piece. So what you want to do is that you want to hold their hands in a way and guide them through the piece, direct them to where you want them to see, and you can do that by contrast, with the principle of contrast. And Ben also said, I actually made not many small comp before jumping into the painting, and well, I think it'll pay off then to do a little bit more next time, if that's what you has led to this. And this is my application of the contrast element. I'm actually going to make the snow caps here a little bit more complex, and why it's okay is because it's near the focal point and there's extra detail density here that's drawing us around this area. Or by contrast, you can reduce it by a lot more as well to make it the main focal point stand out even more. So there's different ways of approaching it. And you'll notice that I've also duplicated the shapes as well of this top area to the bottom. It's a bit of a simple way, but repetition is, in a lack of a better word, it's cool. It's a quick way of making something feel more consistent in terms of the design language, and also it hints at extra complexity. And of course, you can change it a little bit more so it's not an exact copy and paste.
And right now I'm just making the leaves inside the greenhouse warmer to contrast it with the plants that are outside of the greenhouse. It's another type of contrast. Color contrast.
Nice.
So if you zoom out, it already feels like this what's inside this building is warmer, and it just really sells, in my opinion, the idea of a greenhouse.
Definitely. And you'll notice that what I'm doing right now is that I'm taking your brief and saying and realizing that it is a very important part of the piece, that the village is shown actually, and showing like there's a additional technology put on it. And before then, there was a part of it, a rock that was in light. I've actually merged it down, but there was a part of it in light. And I feel like it's not helping with the narrative. The house is in shadow, but this rock is in light, which brings attention to the rock because the main focal point is in light, and therefore it usually means that you want people to look in the light as well. And you can of course make the building subtle, but I think just to make the narrative much more obvious, you just don't have the rock there, and then have the house a little bit more in light, but not to the point that it competes with your house.
It's a really good point.
So I'm just doing it here, making it warmer as well. And preferably speaking, I wouldn't want this house to also compete with the height, because this is another contrast as well. It's height contrast. This building is this tall, and the mountain is this tall. Then this is this tall, and it's competing against one another. So either you can raise this part up, the dome, or you can actually make the house a bit more dominant perhaps. Oh, and maybe what would be cool is taking the idea of them using satellite dishes, and that you have, what do you call it, maybe it's on like metal frame, you know, so it stands out more that the technology is part of the house, and it stands out as a silhouette. Once again, silhouette and contrast is king. So both of them are. And maybe make the silhouette more interesting by having a lot more of these, like a little bit more complex shapes.
I like this huge sled on the tractor.
Yeah,
vehicle.
It's really cool. Oh, and I've also made a pathway, just like it's kind of like a pathway that's lit, kind of leading up to the main entrance, just so it's a bit more obvious. And I think you can even capitalize on the idea here. Like, this is more about design thinking, but because there's like a bottle that's being fed into the greenhouse, maybe show that there's some hose system that runs through the building that maybe leads to some sprinklers, you know?
Yeah,
Because
I think...
yeah, go on, Ken.
I think with the... what I feel about the building itself is that I think what you said about having repetition of design is really it's gonna be really helpful, because when I look at it, it feels like everything is just pieces that are assembled together without any sort of design language to it. Like this piece here, it's a different type of design compared to the dome, compared to the building itself. So if you just maybe like round this building a bit, so the building feels like it's all the design language is round, instead of having it clash a lot between like the red part and the glass part. So it just to make the building feel more cohesive in general. Let me try it.
Definitely.
Curve this. But
You
this
can
might
even
be
repeat the metal
completely
frames.
different. Yeah.
You can repeat the metal frames a lot more.
Yeah. I mean, this part here is rectangular, but this one is going diagonally. So why not have this one go diagonally as well? Might help.
Definitely.
Oops. Might help sell the idea that it's part of the same building.
Yeah, I think that you make a good point about that, Ken. And hey, Iris, good to see you on the stream again.
Yay.
So, yeah, I think we should also move on soon, Ken, just because we spent about 20 minutes on this piece already. But just to quickly recap.
Oh, wow, time flies.
I know. Just to quickly recap though, the feedback. I'm just going to nestle all of it into a folder, before and after. Oh, I forgot to bring back the clouds. Oopsie.
Wow.
So, okay. I'll do it very quickly. I'm not going to forget about that. So I'm going to I should also light it up a bit more so it's not as dark. Okay, maybe it's not the best integrated one, but yeah, I'll keep that into consideration for next time. Yeah, I think it makes it feel a bit fluffier, but yeah, it definitely needs more love put into the clouds. But you get the idea. So to recap the feedback, I would say think about these key elements. So if I had to contrast, so it's the idea of contrast, subtract, don't just add, bolder silhouettes to communicate the design, of the area, which I think is very crucial. And as well, what would I say? So I'll just put in simplify. And the last part, I would say, what would I say is the last part? I think is just,
I don't know.
Functionality, thinking about that. Hey Karta, good to see you on the stream, man. And just to read some of the comments, Iris says such good points. Thank you. Hopefully it helps you out, or whoever else is watching the stream too. And yes, I do think that having a summary can help just make it into a more digestible amount of information. And Vanity's Fall says, to Kako Ben, I love the design of your mountain, but I also agree with the feedback. Maybe it can return in the future. Well, you're more than welcome to post your social media links, Ben, onto the stream, so that people can actually see your your upcoming works as well, and stay up to date with what you come up with.
Sure.
But yes, that would summarize my feedback. So last part, functionality, it's just making it stand out. So the communications tower, I made it stand out more, and maybe adding a hose through the water that's feeding through a tube that could act maybe as a sprinkler system. So something rather than just a giant bottle stuck to the ceiling with nowhere to go.
Yeah, that's really nice.
Yeah.
You know what? I would add just a bit more snow on the roof of that building.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's a good idea, actually. Yeah, that's a really good point that I forgot.
Because right now, I feel like there's a bit of noise there, but yeah, it's very minor.
Yep.
Alright, so let me summarize my feedback. It's about contrast between the focal point and the background, and we showed before and after. So as you can see, before the background calls too much attention to itself, because one, it has a lot of details done on it, and then in terms of value, the darks are kind of similar in value with what's in the middle ground and then foreground. So just by adding some atmospheric perspective, it already separates the focal point with the background.
Nice.
And then with the mountain, just kind of using the mountain to reinforce the focal point with this shape here. I think before it was just, I think the biggest thing with the before is that every piece feels like its own separate thing. So just by having a few things flow a bit more into each other, even in the building shape, will help kind of bring it all together.
Definitely. And I like the way that you did the stylization of the mountain, Ken. I think I lost it a little bit with my paint over. So yeah, I think that's a way to keep the cartoony feel.
I really like what you did with repeating the dome. That's pretty good.
Because the whole place actually kind of feels like, Indian architecture to me. So I feel like it'll be good to kind of echo that as well. So I don't know if that was intentional, Benjamin, but I am a sucker for Indian architecture. It's actually my focal point around my latest personal project. So that's a little bit off topic, but yeah. if you want to have me like something a lot more, just put in a little bit of Indian architecture influence in it, and that's an instant like for me. Well, even if it wasn't intentional, I think it's really cool choice of shapes.
So easy to please.
I know, I'm a simple guy, you know. I see Indian architecture I like.
Yeah. All right.
Okay,
so really nice work. And
yes.
Let's move on to the next one.
Yes, and thank you so much once again for submitting it. It's a really great piece. And we have one more and another one.
2 more actually.
2 more, yes.
Yeah.
So we have one more piece. So bear with us, guys. And I think we can keep this feedback more concise this time, so that we don't end up stretching the podcast for too long.
So this one is by let's see. This one is by Joshua, and the description is, it's basically just a desert speeder, maybe making a trip to a neighboring city or something. Was playing about with painting over 3D for the first time, so just seeing what kind of finish I could get. Mostly would be cool to get help with render as well as design of the ship. Okay, so what do you think, Jourdan?
Well, for me, I think that... Wait, give me a moment. Let me just finish copy pasting my reference, because I've taken the time, or both Ken and I have taken the time before the start of the podcast to just gather references, so we can cut out the time for research. So I'll show this later. But I think for the piece, let's have a closer read. So painting over 3D for the first time, just to see what kind of finish I can get. And I think when it comes to the idea of a desert speeder, I think the basic shape is there, because you have that nice curved shape which tends to feel more aerodynamic and a lot faster in general. But I think in terms of the design itself, there's quite I feel like it raises a few more questions and problems than it does solving it. So one of the first ones is that I'm actually not quite sure, for example, like where the pilot sits, for example, and in terms of the functionality of the shapes as well. Assuming that this is the engine at the back, but it doesn't feel very fast in comparison to the shapes. It feels like it's almost in conflict. You have a lot of round, chunky shapes here, whereas the front is sleek. So it feels like, okay, it's fast, but at the same time, at the back, it doesn't look fast.
Yeah, and also it's connected by some kind of accordion-like shape.
Yeah, and judging from
between the body
though,
and the engine.
Yeah, I'm not too sure about the connection part actually. But judging from the silhouette, from the shadow that it's casting, I think it's a cool idea to split it into 2 like that. So we can definitely work off of that. So I'm going to compile my reference images properly and begin my feedback. So in the meantime, what do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree with what you've already said. And with this shadow showing what the body of the vehicle is actually like, because from the side we don't actually see the actual shape, because it's from the side. So adding this kind of shadow really helped what do you call it? It just helps make more interest to the vehicle itself. But then again, it raises the question of where does the pilot seat?
Or
Maybe
there is
where is it located? Maybe, but it just feels a bit wrong because there's nothing inside here.
And
I do think that I think it would be a much stronger image if you could split the silhouette. So you're not only seeing this kind of shape on the shadow, but also on the silhouette of the vehicle itself. Because right now, if we just look at it at a glance, it just looks like one big chunk of body instead of like two prongs.
Yeah.
So yeah, man. And I think if you're saying that this is a speeder, then it needs to feel speedy. And what Jourdan said, the forms are kind of clashing and blocky, so it kind of doesn't help sell the idea that it's speeding, even though you added some motion blur, but it still doesn't sell the idea enough.
If you have to rely on a motion blur to actually sell the idea that it's speedy, then I don't think the design is strong enough to stand alone. I mean, it helps, but I think we need to not rely on the effects to communicate that.
Yeah. And so I was trying to find references of vehicles that's a bit more futuristic that we can probably use to help improve your designs. I think it's especially useful for vehicles to have references always be on your screen, because for me it's quite a difficult topic to do because I'm not quite proficient in mechanical design, vehicle design, so I always need some kind of reference to refer back to.
And I think that's the thing with design in general, especially when it comes to what Ken touched upon. It's like vehicle designs, because we're so used to seeing it that I think we have a certain expectations of what makes a convincing vehicle design. And if, for example, just as a direct comparison, if we see the way that the cut lines are made and also the details on it compared to a real vehicle, we'll notice that there's a lot of differences already. Usually for speedier vehicles, you'll notice that the cut lines are also a little bit speedier too. It's not sliced down in this way, because I think when it's going through intense speeds, it will need to kind of hold itself together. And it, visually speaking, when the flow is interrupted in that way, it just doesn't feel like it could travel at high speeds.
I think they meant the scale to be bigger. I thought that was the driver inside the tiny silhouette.
Oh, I see.
I don't see any. Wait, where's the silhouette?
Let me see. Let me double check as well. Maybe here, but that's a split in the middle.
Sure.
Or maybe at the back.
Not sure. Because the size of the road and this bush here kind of indicates otherwise. I'm not sure.
I see. Yeah. Maybe. But I think that's the thing, because it's quite ambiguous. I think that's where we need to clarify a few things. Le Mans. Cars from Le Mans. Well, Carta's more of a hard surface guy, so I think it'll be worth following. Ooh, I see. Yeah, there's lots of really cool cars here.
Yeah.
Like this one looks
And
ultra speedy.
When you're saying, you can't see it on your screen, Jourdan. By the way.
I've already.
Okay. Yeah. It's cool.
Yeah, that's really nice.
I think with speedy objects, the typical silhouette is something that curves downwards like that. I think back in school, when I was studying in FZD, Fang calls this kind of shape the speed lines, speed shapes. So if we can have that kind of flow into the design of your vehicle, think it would help sell it.
And I think it'll also be good to reference nature, because the shapes instantly reminded me of a sea dragon. And even though it's not a desert speeder or a terrestrial creature by any means, I think it's always good to try and go outside of the box in terms of references. And you'll notice that with the shapes, it flows quite nicely. And there's even these fins, and because it's swimming through the water, if you translate it to a shape on land, it looks like the wind is sweeping all of these fins back in terms of because of how fast it's going. So that's what I'm trying to replicate here as well. And also from the layman's reference is that maybe there's a lot of fins that are kind of, I don't know how to, my French is terrible, or even if,
I have
or
no
if it's
idea.
French at all. So please correct my terrible pronunciation. But yes, I think that's something that we could apply to the shapes here as well. So maybe having it flow back, trying to echo some of the shapes from the sea dragon, or the seahorse. And since it's a desert speeder,
it's a really cool idea. I was gonna say it's really cool idea to mix between different kinds of objects to generate a new unique idea instead of the typical shapes.
I think that is quite crucial, and that's something I've been trying to do even with my own personal work recently, is just go beyond what I normally, I guess, look, not just the obvious reference, but going beyond that. So in this case, I'm looking at nature and sea creatures, which is something a bit unexpected when you think of desert racers. And when I thought of desert racers as well, I thought about dune buggies, and I really like the fact that they have those exposed frames. And maybe it's not the most practical shape when it comes to high speeds. Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like it could make quite a strong visual statement as well if you have those negative shapes to break up, like you do have here in the middle with the empty space. But I think we can definitely put it in higher density in other places as well.
Oh, and you were also mentioning about the materials, right? I think I'm not exactly sure what kind of material that you want to go for, but it just feels matte. And if you look at, well, if that's what you're going for, then that's fine. But if you're going for something a bit more futuristic, but I think you need a lot more reflectivity in your car. So say this material will bounce a lot of light from the ground and the surrounding environment.
Oh, definitely.
I think since you've done this in 3D, you can just add some kind of HDRI for the environment, and then adding some kind of reflective material on it to get a nice reflection that you can overlay on top.
Definitely.
Because 3D is really helpful for this kind of thing. So you should totally utilize it if you've already built this model in 3D.
Yeah, for sure.
Use renderers like Keyshot or
because if you are gonna use 3D, you might as well like keep some of the 3D qualities. So we have some comments in the chat as well. Blessings of the Nine says you should check out Salt Racing. It's quite strange looking. Salt Racing. I mean, that conjures up a very specific image.
I've seen this.
That is super cool. That that just makes me want to completely change my design. Actually, there's some really cool references. You guys in the chat should definitely check it out. I mean, I'm gonna pull one of the cars that I found from it, but it's so cool. Look at that. I think maybe that's what Joshua was looking at as well. But look at that. Oh man, that is
and yeah, I'm gonna try adding a bit some kind of exhaust intake, so it feels like a jet. Oh, and you have this kind of protrusions at the bottom of the vehicle, and that kind of disrupts the flow of it. So when you feel like it's gonna go fast, it just gets stopped by this bumps. So what I did is to just what I'm doing is to just completely remove it. So you see now it already feels much faster just by simplifying it.
The way that I'm approaching that one is that I actually decided to make it a side fin as well to kind of stabilize it.
Yeah, like that. Just adding a bit of that.
So I'm gonna add a little bit more of the frames actually. I really like that, the dune buggy kind of frames. So let's see where I can implement it. Maybe in between as well. Maybe not. It's a little bit too heavy-handed, and I think it goes against the design a bit too much. So I'm not gonna overdo it. But I think another point as well is to just think about basic functionality. So maybe having like headlamps as well to light up the way. Things like that, and big exhaust, because usually for these kinds of machines I would think that it would require an ample amount of exhaustion. I don't know the right term, but just so that it doesn't overheat, especially if it's a desert racer as well. I think it would especially need that, you know. And depending what kind of racer
it is. Gonna steal
is.
some details.
That's what I've pretty much been doing. So if you also want to make it like a commercial racer, you can actually add in some labels as well, because a lot of us tend to associate heavily labeled cars as sponsored and race cars most likely, or maybe a pizza delivery vehicle. Either one of the two, but I think in this case it's more unmistakable. But how cool would it be if you had like high-speed desert delivery, pizza delivery system? This is where your pizza comes in, or gets delivered in it. So yeah, this is what I think, and you can always use the decals to actually push the feeling of flow. So maybe the decals as well could flow according to the design language. And Carter says, super fast pizza delivery over the Sahara Desert. Exactly, man. So you can have the decals kind of flow along with the shape of the vehicle. There we go. And then of course you can add in some of the reflections from the environment. Let me aim to do it a bit quicker. I've been working in values for so long that now that I flip it on color, the colors are so whack. So yeah, this is not focusing on the color itself. So I'm just gonna add in some reflections.
I'm gonna put a bit more love to the cityscape at the back. Just take some photos of city skyline.
Yeah, especially if you're already going down the route of photo bashing, then you might as well go for that more realistic kind of look.
Sure, let's do that.
And with the top facing area, since it's facing the sky, I'm lighting it up just to make a clearer distinction between with the materials. And I'm also going to just darken some of the areas with some cast shadows of sort. I'm not gonna do the cast shadows from the vehicle just yet though. Just more like self-contained cast shadows. And then now I can work on but yeah, I'm just going to extend this part.
I feel like this piece is taking so much focus. My focus, because I don't usually do hard surfaces.
Yeah, well, that is our caveat.
So difficult.
We're not necessarily vehicle artist or hard surface artists, but I still think some fundamental principles of design would apply here. And just from a first read, I do think that it's lacking the feeling of a desert speeder, you know. And even for example, the brush or the bushes in the foreground, it could flow in the direction. Or even not having it would be quite good actually. It already feels much faster.
I'm making it too futuristic. It looks like a luxury car instead.
Yours feels comfortable, Ken, like a future limousine, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, not necessarily a problem.
But it's not. Doesn't follow the brief. But I still hope that you get something out of it in terms of like using reference and about the speed lines and stuff.
Yeah. And I'm gonna add back in the DQ01. Alright, so there we go. This is my paint over, and if I had to summarize it as well, I'm going to say, yeah, I think this might seem like a really obvious one, but use reference, rely on unique inspiration, or at least think outside the box when it comes to it as well. Box, so maybe speedy. Seahorse looks speedy, and therefore you can inspire your design based on the seahorse. And lastly, storytelling elements, and I think adding stickers, decals, or stickers can really help. And of course, just have a strong silhouette that communicates the design right away. And that would be the summary of my feedback.
Yeah, awesome, man.
And please look at this image in black and white, not in color. I'll set a color mode layer on top so that there's no confusion. Okay, what about yours, Ken? How would you summarize your feedback? It definitely looks a lot speedier.
Yeah, I think my feedback is more about completely different shit. I think the feedback is to really utilize flow in making things look speedy. The speedy things are, like I said, typically has that split lines look to it, like that. So if you're drawing gesturally, you can make it like that, you know, like it has flow to it. I think that that's what's gonna really help improve improve what the viewers see, and just really help them think that, oh, it's something speedy. Because what you had before is that a lot of the shapes, let me draw this real quick. A lot of the shapes are stopping the viewer or the flow, and it makes it feel like it's not speedy.
I see.
Like that. It's like if you just make it flow like that, it already feels a lot speedier. Like just slight flow to it. See that? And then again at the back, it's like this, and then go straight down. If you just make it flow from one form to the next, like that already helps sell the idea better.
I think that
same
already
thing here at the bottom. If you're gonna continue this, do it like that. Something like that.
Yeah.
Yep.
There we go. Yeah. You know what your design does remind me of, Ken?
What?
I'm gonna put up an image. It's this. How many of you in the chat remember using that back in school, or maybe still do use it right now?
Oh my god.
I mean, those long ones were like some of the cooler looking designs, actually.
Hey, actually that might not be a bad idea. If you, then you can pretty much turn anything into a cool vehicle.
Oh, definitely. That's true. It's like the guy that used like a peeler and things like that.
You know, actually the one of the Star Wars ship for the bounty hunter ship, Boba Fett, that's based on a lamp, like a street light.
I see. Well, there you go, folks. You can get inspiration from pretty much anything. So I think that does tie back to one of my feedback, which is, you know, try and think outside the box when it comes to inspiration. And sometimes the fact that it will remind you of something can make the design more memorable. I say this as a joke, but it could be a selling point, you know. Ah, I see.
That's actually a street light.
Cool. That's really dope.
Here,
all right, Ken.
Wait, this one. You see that?
Yeah. It's so awesome though. I think it's a really cool shape. Oh, there we go. I see it.
Yep.
And that would wrap up the design, this paint over. And we're just gonna have one last quick one, guys. And I think for this one, Ken, we can go much faster.
Yes. Just
so we don't run for too long. But we actually have a couple of pieces from Dommel. So we're going to pull them up on stream. And I also pasted it in the Google document, Ken. In the other one.
Should we just pick one of them?
Yeah, let's just choose one so that we don't stretch
maybe the witch or the mermaid. I don't know. Which one do you think?
I actually think the first one, because it feels like there's most potential for design feedback there.
For the design?
I think so.
Yeah, but the description is just, it's the one of the characters from Hollow Knight.
Oh, okay. All right.
I'm not exactly sure what.
All right, we can do the witch then. Let's do something a little bit more illustrative this time then.
Sure. The witch?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There we go. So this is a piece by Dom. And let's see if there's a description on it. So, which one is a personal illustration based on my drawing I did a few years ago? I think the main problem could be contrast and anatomy. I will say, in terms of the anatomy, I think from a first glance, it's quite solid. But I think if we look closer, then yes, I do think there's a few points we can improve on. And just to read out a few comments from the chat, Blessings of the Nine said, in relation to Boba Fett's ship, can we copy Strike Star Wars? And I think those manufacturers of the street lamps certainly should. And Dom,
they'll never win against Disney.
Oh yeah.
The
Especially
Disney
not
money.
when they're with Disney now.
Yeah.
Alright, so we can do a quick paint over on the which one. And I think when it comes to the anatomy, I'll have to do a little bit of a trace over just to see if the anatomy is solid or not. So first glance, it looks quite alright. That's the thing. So, and I do like the pose as well, Dommel. I think it's quite expressive. And it's not just a neutral pose as well, which can get a little bit boring, I think. Depending if it's a concept or not. Yes, I do like the flow of the whole piece. But I think when it comes to the anatomy, now that I'm doing a little bit of a trace over it, maybe the body is a little bit too thick. But everything else looks quite solid, I'd say. So not too much to say when it comes to anatomy. So except maybe the body is just a bit too thick in my opinion. And maybe that
as a note, I'm not a character designer, so
yeah, I'm not too much
rely on me for anatomy.
Yeah. But I think in general, just for stability of the shape as well, maybe the sword can be leaning in. Just so there's I think it'll be nice to contrast the flow of the legs going down with the leg going inward, so you almost have a more triangular kind of composition. So yeah, I think we can just fix this part a little bit, and I think then we can move on to the contrast, talking about contrast.
What I'm doing right now while you're fixing the anatomy is one of the issues that I see is again valley grouping and having a stronger cast shadow or maybe not cast shadow but a stronger light direction, because right now everything feels kind of lit in the same intensity. Even though right now it kind of feels like it's being lit from this way, but even this part here feels like it's being lit this way. So there's just a bit of inconsistency with how you light the character. Which
on
is
Hazai,
which
good to see you in the chat.
Hello. Which is what I'm trying to fix, and just having a stronger shape for the shadow will definitely improve, in my opinion, improve the wreath of the character.
Oh, and I'm noticing that the head is a little bit too tall as well, so I just moved it down a tad bit. And what I'm also working on is actually improving the overall silhouette. I think in terms of anatomy, it's quite solid, so I'm not going to comment too much on it. There's, like I said, a few smaller things, but I think one thing we can improve on is just the flow. And I'm going by the principle of simple versus complex, and this is when it comes to edges. So when it comes to the shape here, I'm keeping it quite simple. As you can see, I'm trying to keep this simple flow going on. So I'm even going to move the hat a little bit, and I'm going to make it go this way. And whereas the other side of the edge is complex, as you can see. And I'm going to also tilt the sword inwards, which I haven't done. It can still be where it is, but I think as a personal preference, I'd prefer it to be tilted outwards, just so that there's a contrast to where the leg is going, so that there's not that obvious parallel. And it creates more symmetrical composition.
And it's gonna make a point about materials, especially on the head. The value between the highlight and the shadow is too great. I mean, which is fine if everything in your painting is has that kind of value range. But sorry, not that kind of. It would be great if only certain parts of the painting has that kind of value range, because it will help sell the material of the object. But right now, everything feels like it has the same value range, so everything feels like it's made of the same material. So just by reducing the specular and highlight of some of the objects, like the head and then the cloth, will help with selling the idea of the material.
Definitely. I think you can also make the so this is different topic, but you can make the neck stand out more, like on one part at least, because I think it's being a little bit too covered by the hair, and it just makes it a bit difficult to differentiate the anatomy a little bit. So I think showing the shoulders could be a good way of clarifying that a bit, just so it's not as ambiguous.
And then again, if the light is coming from this way, if the object is in shadow, don't put too much detail or rendering on it, because it will distract from the focal point.
Just keeping silhouette clean. Push the rest back a bit.
And I'm just reducing the amount of detail everywhere. See, it's having a strong shadow shape already adds so much to the hand itself. I think. See that?
Yeah. I think in terms of lighting, you're definitely addressing it really nicely. I'm just focusing more on the silhouette and anatomy aspects. Even having the eyes glow would be quite cool, but I mean that might go against the character design, so I'm not going to do that just yet. But I think in terms of selling the character as well, you can maybe show a little bit more about what your witch can do, Dommel. So maybe you can show that a lot of the souls are actually being emitted from the sword. So you can increase that actually. If you're and one of the things you said that you might be struggling with is contrast. So one thing you can do is help the character pop out by, I think, having the souls in the background glowing a lot more, just so it becomes a light on dark value scenario. And then you can show that the lighting is flowing, or the effects is flowing from the sword. So maybe it can hint that she captures a lot of the souls, you know. And you can make the expressions a lot more obvious as well in the souls. So let me change the color.
I think the loincloth could have a better flow to it. So like, I don't know.
Maybe not that much. Well, you get the idea. But I think it can just help tell the story a bit more. Maybe it can make the souls look a lot more anguished. But I would even simplify a lot of the areas here. Just so, since it's not the focal point, I wouldn't worry about that too much. So so even just this, having these two before. Wait, let me group it. Before, after. And that's just from far away. Before, after. And this is not even with all of the color corrections. And with the shadows that Ken has done. And you can of course now take advantage of really strong rim light to make your image pop.
Stop adding rim lights to everything.
It works. It works so well though. I'm gonna add it. I'm gonna add in the rim lights. And it just helps. It helps so much, honestly. But yeah.
Oh, and with the hair, I think what you can also do with the hair is this goes back to material definition. If, for example, the highlight the highlight goes from this range. I'm gonna do it your style, Jourdan. This is the highlight. It doesn't feel, you don't really feel the shine of the hair if the highlight is too big. So if you just narrow it down, like this, you narrow down the size of the highlight, it will make the hair feel more shiny and more, what do you call it? Just
Glossy,
yeah, that's the right word.
glossy.
Like that. So you just,
I'm gonna reduce the
by compressing the value range a bit, it helps show the materials a bit better. So doing some studies on the material properties of what's in the painting would help a lot.
Glossy. Yeah, definitely. I'm also just adjusting the lighting a tiny bit, just to kind of round off the feedback. But yes, that would be pretty much it, Domo. So hopefully it helps. It has helped you out in some way. So I'm just gonna quickly flip through the before and after. Wait, gonna pocket this in. Before and after. Before and after. Just to summarize the feedback, think of simple and complex edges. I think that can really help in making a more dynamic silhouette. And second of all is just contrast. So having dark on light values to frame the figure. And what else? Yeah, anatomy, I guess. Anatomy. So I would say those three things is just the contrast, anatomy, and also thinking about the flow of shapes as well. So yes, there we go.
Really nice.
What about you, Ken? How would you summarize your feedback? And let's see a before and after, actually.
Give me a second.
All right.
Right.
Oh yeah. What would you suggest, Iris, in terms of helping to push the focal point?
Oh yeah.
And yeah, I would agree actually. I think having a stronger focal point.
What I would do is, you know what I'm gonna do, Jordan?
Mm-hmm. What?
Color dodge.
It works.
No, but it works. Just a bit of color dodge.
Right. Yeah, definitely, Iris. And I think if I had a little bit more time as well, I would personally darken the bottom a bit more. Oh, not like that, but and definitely increasing the lighting on the face a bit more myself. So imagining maybe there's a tertiary light source somewhere and something that contrasts. Let me see what you've done with the color dodge. Whoa.
No, just a bit. I think this is still a bit too much.
Yeah.
Just a bit. Yeah.
I personally add in a tertiary light source that is contrasting to the colors that have been used so far. Since green can be a little bit ambiguous, I feel like maybe to make it feel like it's in the outside in the night sky, I'd add in a cool light source from the top. That's kind of highlighting a few of the areas. So that's my way of increasing the focal point.
So my before and after. Oh, actually, I'm gonna add a bit of reflectivity or specular from the glow of the pendant. That would be nice.
But yeah, nice, Ken. I think definitely with a little bit more time to define some of the areas, it will, I think, really help with the image. But it's a really solid one as it is, so yeah, it's just a matter of redirecting the focal point, as Iris has said, and also it's just fixing some other issues such as anatomy and really pushing the. So yeah, that's my thoughts.
And for me, some work with improving the silhouette. And for example, the flow of the loincloth, since she has this kind of flow, somewhat glowing, and this feels a bit going against that flow. So what I did is to repeat that S curve over and over.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Also by value grouping of parts that are in shadow, for example the chest, then like this part on the neck, like on the hands. Basically parts that are in shadow, I just group them into similar value before, after, and then adding cast shadows, of course, and also making a bit more material definition, so everything doesn't look like everything feels like they have different type of materials. So right now, everything has the same value range from the dark to the light area, just by making them different, it will help sell the clothing, the hair, and then the skin better. And then lastly, like Iris said about focal point, I just added very slight color dodge to the face and the butt. Just to add some, to make it pop a bit more.
Pop, definitely.
Yeah.
All right, and I think that should wrap up our feedback session for this week, guys. And since we've taken quite a while, gloss over the Q&A session this time, but we will be closing it off with our segment. Is a segment of the podcast where we showcase artwork that have really left an impression on us throughout the week. And Ken, you should start things off this time.
Okay. So we're doing art of the week first, and then Q&A.
Yes, we're doing artwork of the week instead of Q&A, just because we've taken quite a bit of time.
Yeah. All right. So the first one, I have two images that I really like that I found this week. The first one is by Veika Somerna, and I just love this image of a forest scene that he did. I love the shape design. Everything feels very it feels so soft to touch, and the shapes are really nicely defined, and then the lighting, the glow, it just feels so magical.
Oh, definitely.
Love everything about this painting.
And you should solo your screen, Ken, so people can have a little bit of a closer look.
Yeah, good point.
Just so we can show off some of our fancy podcast transitions. There we go. Hopefully my voice is audible this time. But yes, look at all those juicy details, guys. Like even the moss feels like it's nice and fuzzy, you know, like you can just roll your face in it and you can feel it just brushing up against your skin.
Yep. Feels so soft. And then the next one, let's not linger too much on that one.
Oh, and you can follow Veika on his ArtStation as well.
Right, ArtStation at Veika.
Yes. So get on that, you guys. The next one is
by Marcin
Jakubowski.
Marcin Jakubowski? I don't know. But again, the shape design in this is so fantastic.
Oh, it's crazy good.
The design of the Yetis, and then I like how he arranged the details. It doesn't feel like it complicates the painting, even though there's actually so much details everywhere. But the way he arranges the light and shadow, it just makes a really nice, cohesive painting.
And it feels so layered too. That's the thing. There's so many crazy details, but it reads so well.
Yep.
It's amazing. And this also goes back to what we were talking about exposure early on, guys, where a lot of the value ranges is allocated in the shadows, and areas in light you'll notice that it's grouped together quite narrowly on the value range. So this is a master display, I think, of that principle. It's really nicely done. Crazy good.
It's really good.
Yes. And I will also link the ArtStation to Marcin Jakubowski as well. So be sure to follow them on ArtStation, guys. They're amazing artists. On my end, for my artwork of the week, I've decided to showcase another artwork by a good friend of mine, Morten, and this is his entry for the Global Game Art Challenge, which was hosted a while back. And if you could believe it, guys, they are putting up a reward for first place of a grand total of $25,000 if you manage to snag it.
Wow, that's crazy.
I know, that's crazy. And this is what Morten has managed to come up with for his entry. And the brief for it was to illustrate a depiction of how the ancient city of China, Lolan, I think, could have looked like. And Morten's take on it was this temple or series of temples in a cave where there are large chandeliers that the inhabitants use for ceremonial purposes and all of those things as well. And I really love the way that it turned out. I managed to see it from the start of the piece actually up to the way that he finished it, and I think he has done such a fantastic job in making the place feel alive, like the way that he has done the atmosphere and all of these small layers of details that he has put in just makes the place feel like it's alive. And it definitely captures the feeling of an ancient city that has gone long past its prime. And it captures that feeling of magnificence to me.
And I think you also mentioned about the setting being in a cave, right? I think it looks really great. I mean, in terms of the sense of scale, I can see the roof of the cave looming over the towers, and that just kind of make you feel very small.
Oh yeah, oh for sure. It just feels like I can believe what it would be like in that place, breathing the thick atmosphere. It's just really masterfully done, in my opinion. And just the way that he's integrated 3D and photos to the point that you can't really tell anymore which one is which. So yeah, he has a lot more artworks like that on his art station. And yes, that is the reason why I decided to choose his piece for my selection of artwork of the week. And I actually only have one this time, guys.
Alright.
Indeed, it's very successful indeed, Iris. So yes, that brings us to the end of today's podcast. And would you believe it? We've done it for 2 hours already?
2 hours.
Yes, 2 hours.
A little bit more than 2 hours. Yep.
Yeah, time really flies, honestly. And we really do appreciate everyone sharing their artwork with us, and for everyone else on the chat to learn from their critiques and paint overs as well. And hopefully you guys have learned something from it as well.
Yeah, hopefully this episode is useful to you guys. And again, thanks for submitting to us and trusting us with the feedback.
Arigato.
Okay, so if you find this episode helpful or entertaining, please share it with someone else that you think would find it the same as well. And then please follow us on Instagram and Facebook for updates on upcoming content, and also on YouTube to watch our previous episodes, and of course on Twitch to catch future episodes live.
Yes, to get
and we also have
as soon as we go live.
Yes, and we also have a Facebook group for our community which you can join. The link that I posted on the chat. And yeah, that's it. I'm sorry we didn't have a dedicated section for Q&A, but feel free to message us on the group or
and a final
email
thing
us,
as well. We'll be sending out the PSDs of these paint overs to the people that have submitted it respectively. So you'll be able to analyze it at your own leisure.
Actually, we might just post the link to the Dropbox folder on the group so everyone can access it. Maybe
we'll ask the
we'll see. We'll
people
ask.
that submitted for permission. But yes, we'll be doing future episodes of feedback session as well again. So you'll have your chance to submit your artwork in next time for a live critique and paint over.
And be sure to provide us with a description of your image.
Please do. Otherwise, we won't be able to give a proper feedback. But yes, thank you so much, guys, for joining us for this episode. And hopefully you have enjoyed it. And we'll see you again next time at the next drawing table.
Alright. See you guys on the next podcast. Bye-bye.
Alright. Take care, everyone. See you.
See you.